Y'all prepare yourself for some craziness because it is a massive week on Wizard 101. Every day this week, different content creators, including your boy, are going to be teasing upcoming shadow spells for the Darkmoor update. Today, Daniel Sunsword covered the balanced shadow spell teasers. I've linked their video in the description. This is our first look as to what they're going to be doing to every shadow enhance spell and shadow spell in the game right now. None of them are going to be the same. Starting off with the pure shadow spells, I guess these are going to be tied to the school of balance because today is balance theme. But this is the new shadow trickster. It's like a shadow form that you can basically do no other pips needed. Now, right away, let's talk about the new mechanic that we see on this spell, and we'll see with every shadow enhanced spell for every school this week. Right, basically, all of these shadow magic using spells are going to add backlash, and in order to reduce a backlash, there is basically a payment that you have to make to that shadow creature. You start at 15% lash, you could reduce backlash 5% per turn, and in order to reduce your lash, you essentially have to do something the creature likes. You basically got to pay it every goddamn round that it's out. Now, let's talk about Shadow Trickster. This is a 25% damage aura for 3 turns, but it also, in exchange for a shad, steals a pip and gives the caster a balance pip. So you basically heard that right. You get an aura, a steal pip, and a balance pip, all in exchange for a shadow pip. And in order to reduce that 50% lash that you start off with, you basically have to trade off blades on self. Now, there's a lot of ways I can already see people using this, right? Let's say that you have maybe, I don't know, a triple blade of some sort. Maybe a spear, one of the new spears, or one of the blades. If you have this out and you use the new shadow trickster, you get an aura, you get a balance pip, you steal a pip, and you already have 3 blades on you to give up in order to not even take backlash. So y'all can probably tell, if you have a way to reduce your backlash, these spells are free buffs, free utility, free craziness. The other balance adjacent, I guess, shadow form that was teased today was Dark Trickster. Now, this one looks so crazy confusing. I've seen a lot of people say that it looks stupid, it looks crazy, like how could you possibly understand? But basically, right? The pact for this is that you have to give up shields. So ideally, in order to not take backlash, you have a spirit shield or elemental shield on you. And what are you getting in trade of that shadow pip and the potential backlash? You basically get like a shadow wand hit that also gives you 235 pierce blades and 235 traps on the opponent. And as far as the symbols, right, it looks crazy, but basically the pierce blades are based on the school of the caster, and the traps are based on the school of your weaving. So that's a difference between the 2 symbols on this card. So for example, let's say that I were a balance using this spell would do 75 shadow damage, basically like a wand hit. They can get rid of weaknesses or shields, and then it'll give me 2 life traps because I'm weaved into life, and it'll give me 2 universal balance spears because balance gets universal stuff. If a storm were to use this, they would get storm spears and traps for whatever school they were weaving into. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, potentially taking 15% of your max health in terms of backlash just for basically some blades, traps, and a wand hit, kind of ridiculous in my opinion. However, there's even more reason to pack these shadow spells because you could combine them with base versions of new spells to make shadow enhanced spells. So this is kind of crazy, but let's take Live Realm Gaze for example, right? What they're basically doing to Gaze and every other shadow enhanced spell, they're making a new base version of the spell that can do utilities that we've never seen. And then if you combine that base spell with one of these pure shadow spells, you can make shadow enhanced spells that also can do backlash. So these spells also got teased and they're literally crazy. So this is a new base Gaze of Fate. Basically, it either does a balance hit and a random hit and a bubble, all for just 5 pips, no shadow pip at all. Or it can still do a double hit, but the second hit, I guess, is based on your school. So I guess a balance would still just get a double balance hit. But instead of a bubble, the other base Gaze, it basically can give up traps for blades. So I guess, for example, maybe you were setting up like, I don't know, like an Ellie trap or a spirit trap. You can basically give these up for blades. And they're 45 universal blades, which is a pretty cool mechanic for Gaze to have. But let's say that you combine this base Gaze with a shadow spell. This is a new shadow enhanced Gaze. Way more damage than we're used to seeing. So now you do need a shadow pip to cast this, right? And you would have had to fuse this with, you know, like you would have had to fuse a base Gaze with a shadow spell, that is a lot more than we currently have to do. But if you were to do this, you either get a balance hit and a random school hit, or a balance hit and a chromatic hit, meaning based on the school of the caster. And you could either get a bubble, or you could just get 3 blades. You could basically choose between which buff this double hit gives you. And obviously, because it's a shadow magic, there is a potential to take backlash. In order to reduce a lash with this, you have 3 rounds to give up 3 traps on the enemy. That's basically what the pact on Gaze of Fate is. Now, these pacts, they sound very, very easy. I would say in PvE, it's very easy to, if you are willing to not kill with this and take all the remaining lash. Let's say that you actually wait the 3 rounds to, you know, like, do what this creature likes. It's pretty easy in PvE just to put traps on your opponent before using this. Would you use this in PvE? I'd say maybe to set up a kill shot. But in PvP, let's say you have traps on your opponent. They could counter the traps and make the lash on this way worse, right? So that counterplay is definitely there. You basically either get a really good hidden blade or a really good hidden bubble, but you can make it even better by basically fusing this with the shadow spell. Now, new base Mockenspiel is also really, really crazy. Now, the top hat, it's kind of weird looking, but I think basically what it does is it hits and then turns any blades on yourself into universal blades. So it's some synergy with elemental and spirit blade. The bottom pat, very, very weak hit, but it could essentially give up dots on your opponent for weaknesses. And I think what this card is basically saying is it could actually give up to 2 dots for up to 440 weaknesses on your opponent. You do have to give up dots for this to be a hit and weakness now, and right now it's already a hit and weakness. So kind of a lot of extra steps to get that weakness out of the spell. But the shadow version of this, right? The one that you get when you combine base Mockenspiel with a shadow spell. Once again, we're looking at something kind of crazy. We're looking at massive 1100 damage on the top hat for 5 pips and a shad. And it can turn, apparently, I guess, up to 9 blades on yourself into universal blades. We don't know what % these universal blades are going to be. I think that's going to really determine whether this is very good or not. But if you want to use this without taking lash, you do have to have dots on your enemy. That's not that easy for a balance to do. And once you give up a dot, the next round, you would have to give up another dot to further reduce your lash. And the bottom pad, still the same thing. You do need to have dots on your opponent, basically up to 3 to take 0% backlash from this. But in exchange, you get a really cool hit that does nearly 700 damage and 5 weaknesses on the opponent. Now, going from the double weakness it is in Live Realm to a 5 weakness kind of spell, kind of crazy, but keep in mind, you can only reduce lash 1 round at a time, meaning you have to get rid of a dot on turn 1, a dot on turn 2, and a dot on turn 3 on your opponent. Those dots have to not expire or be removed by your opponent for you to reduce lash. I would say a dot removing pact is very, very hard to use well. The new base Nested Fury teasers also looking really cool. On the top hat, you just get a new AoE for balance. It just hits elemental. This is really cool for PvE, y'all. It's really nice to see a nice AoE for balance that doesn't use balance. You could use this against balance mobs instead of going through the, you know, the whole whack prism route. I love this spell. I think this is a great example of a spell that unlocks a new utility in PvE. Now that we don't need a shadow pip, you don't have to wait for a shadow pip to use an elemental AoE on a balance. But the bottom patch, just like all these base spells we've seen, kind of weak, right? For 6 pips, it's kind of weak, but I guess all of them will be because they're not shad. But basically what this card is saying is does a little bit of damage, and then it gives up heals on yourself for shields. You're giving up one form of defense for another. I don't really think you would ever give up powerful heals for very removable shields, so very situational bottom path nested. But let's say you were to combine nested with a shadow spell, now you're looking at some craziness. You're looking at 2 different spells that are crazy. The one in PvE is a ridiculous AoE. This is basically an 1100 damage AoE for 6 pips and a shad. Literally the new best AoE in balanced game, I would argue. I think there's no debate on this. This is ridiculous. This is enchantable too, by the way. So if you were to combine nested with the shad and you enchanted it, that's a 1400 damage AoE, and it also gives you shields for free. If you want to do this without taking lash though, you do need to give up heals on self. Again, to take 0% lash, you would need to take 3 heals. Now, I would argue in PvE, this one's very different. Let's say that you were to kill something with this. Yes, you would take the whole remaining lash on this. Let's say that you had no heals on at all. I'm just gonna assume on turn 1, after this kills, you take 15% of your max health. I still think that's worth it. as long as you have a lot of HP, right? For killing minions and maybe even minions on bosses where you just want to reduce the damage output of that fight, this is like a crazy AoE. Way better of an upgrade than I was expecting. And the bottom pad, still a heal pact, meaning you have to have heal over time to reduce lash, but instead of being only 2 shields, it's a balance hit, not an elemental hit, not an AoE either, but it gives you 5 shields. And considering all these shields are 75s, it's a pretty punishing spell if your opponent can't shield counter. Definitely something to watch out for if someone wants to create some massive defense all at once. I don't love that they combine shields and heals though. It's kind of hard to justify doing both forms of, like, I guess, mitigation. I don't know. That's just my pet peeve, but the AoE, it's like chef's kiss. The teaser for Old Man's Endgame is also very cool because it kind of gets around the fact that balance kind of struggles against balance. The top hat is basically a hit that also puts a convert, I guess, on every target that turns your balance damage into any damage that's not balanced. But I guess you would use this into another AoE against, I guess, a lot of mobs that are balanced. I could totally see myself using this every now and then. And the bottom pad, another weird interaction between shields and heals, but pretty weak 6-pip hit. It does like 400 damage, and then it gives up shields on self for heals. I guess if you want to use shields that aren't useful to you and turn them into stuff, I guess you could do it. But as usual, I think the shadow enhanced version of this is the crazy thing. This teaser is what you get when you combine a base Old One's Endgame with a shadow spell. And y'all, this is wild. Once again, we're looking at a massive AoE that basically hits for about 1,000 damage, and it's enchantable, converting the next balance hit, I guess, into any random hit, just like the top path of the base version. And the bottom path is a hit that gives you a 1,500 value heal in the form of 2 heal overtimes. And the crazy part about this is you get all of that over 4 rounds, meaning every round is a massive heal. This is actually gonna heal you faster than a regenerate on a life. And if you want to use this without taking lash, you have to give up shields on self. I would also argue this is a very good pact because it's very easy to get like triple shields, right? Like this is a 0-pip spell that you have to do to set up for not taking lash. I would argue both versions of this spell are ridiculous now. And finally, base Sandworm, the top path is a hit and trap. Just like, I guess, a lot of hit and traps that we've seen, like Brim or, you know, maybe something like that. Or you could give out blades for traps. I don't really see why you would use the bottom path over the top path, because you basically have to give up buffs for a different type of buff when you could just get a guaranteed buff. I don't know if that made sense, but I think top path is way better in PvE and PvP if you just want to hit and buff. But the shadow version of this, absolutely crazy. It's either a hit and single trap for a massive 900 damage in PvE, not allowed in PvP, or still a very good 600 damage balance hit that gives you 3 traps. Now, just like the base version of this, these are all universal traps. However, to not take lash from Sandworm, you still have to give up blades on self. That is a little bit harder, I'd say, right? That kind of requires you to Ellie blade, you know, maybe Spirit Blade, or just Blade over and over again while the pact is out. But you're definitely looking at some explosive damage with this spell as well. All in all, y'all, I definitely think the pure shadow spells, they're not super usable. I think the rewards for those are heavily outweighed by the risk, but not only are some of these base spells like Gaze really cool, I think some of these shadow enhanced spells like the AoEs that we're seeing, they're like literally busted. Hopefully I explained these teasers somewhat well. I just wanted to give my take on how these spells are going to be used, and there's so many teasers that are going to be covered, so make sure to check out every content creator that Wiz basically posted on that visual from the beginning of the video, and I'll try to do my best to talk about how I think they're going to affect the game. Check out everyone involved, y'all, and drop a like on this video if you enjoyed. Leave a sub if you're new, and as always, I look forward to reading y'all's thoughts in the comments. Stay awesome, y'all. See y'all soon. And yeah.